Welcome back to Man vs. Meeple, the show where we talk about all things board game related. I'm David Waybright, and I'm here with Jeremy Salinas today to talk about Quad Heroes. Quite odd, as you said, Jeremy.
That's right.
But quite odd in a fun, kind of mayhem sort of way. This is the first game from Ryan Eiler and his company Wonderment Games, and this is going to be on the Kickstarter pretty soon.
Yeah.
And it's really unique. The core thing that this is built around is an interesting tumble mechanic.
That's right.
But the game itself is scenario based, so there's a lot of different ways you can play it.
So it is a modular game. Depending on the scenario, you will take one of the larger tiles, fit those together. Each of these tiles has a starting location that allows the players to kind of line up to begin the game.
Yeah.
And a player's going to have a player board. The player boards are kind of what pushes the movement along with the characters. Now, the characters are represented by cubes.
Yeah, this is the cool part of this thing.
Yeah.
The characters, as you can see here, are these cubes. Now, these are, as we say with all of these previews, prototype components. These have been painted.
They're quite good, though, right?
Oh, they're amazing.
They look cool.
There's a lot of 3D printed stuff in here. I believe the miniatures that come with the game are going to be even nicer than this, but not painted. So you get the joy of painting them yourself.
Sure.
But the mechanic here that they've added is the tumble mechanic. And basically, these aren't dice, even though they might look like it. You're going to start off every turn by tumbling in one direction.
Right.
And then, depending on how you've built your player board, as you were saying, you're going to take an additional skill-based action based on whatever side of your character or cube is facing up.
And those skills are like sliding diagonal, dashing, jumping, and even tumbling again, depending on the way that your character lands. So whatever face-up portion of the cube it rests on is the action that you get to take.
Yeah, and doing it, and we'll get into the details of each of those a little bit more in a second, but the whole idea here is you're racing around the board. There's going to be scenarios where you're literally just racing. You know, get from point 1 to 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then there's some pick up and delivers where you're all trying to get crystals and then deliver them to certain places.
Right.
All the while bumping and shoving each other into pits, into walls, breaking walls, building tunnels. They've really put a lot in this game.
Yeah, there's a lot of different obstacles on the board. As you mentioned, there's walls, there's rivers, there's whirlpools, there's pits, which you can get pushed into, which will reset you back to the last cleared spot on the board.
Right.
And there's other obstacles that can come into play with the cards themselves. There's springs and warps and cannons and all kinds of different things, which will both allow you to move further and hinder your opponent's movement.
Yeah, in fact, there's some really cool things. And I know we're a little all over the place, but this game has a lot packed into it.
It does.
One of the items that you can get, in fact, is a teleporter. And you can actually not only use it yourself, but when you're pushing each other around, you can push someone into a teleporter.
That's right.
Then the way the teleporters work, you're rolling a die, you're moving that many spaces away from the teleporter. But if you're the one who pushed another player into the teleporter, you're the one who gets to pick where they go.
That's right.
So you could actually teleport them into a pit. And you're basically doing this the entire game, trying to achieve your goal and trying to mess up everyone else from achieving the same.
So the actual gameplay works like this. On your turn, you get 2 actions, basically. One is the main phase. Before you're allowed to move, you're allowed to play any number of cards from your hand. You do have a maximum of 5 cards in your hand at any given time. So you can play cards before you move. The first thing you get to do is you get to tumble, and then you get to move an X number of spaces depending upon what is up. According to the player board.
Exactly.
And your player board will change over the course of the game with upgrades that come into play, either by allowing you to move extra spaces, to warp around the board, to steal items from each other.
Get extra cards
to get extra cards. Once you are done moving, you also have another option to play cards. And it really depends on the cards you have, if they benefit you before moving, after moving.
Exactly.
Whatever that may be. And then you go to the exploration phase. That's where you get to draw cards. You always have a native 1 card draw at the end of your turn. And again, that can be mitigated by the way in which you upgrade your quad hero.
Exactly. The upgrades, they've kind of broken down into 2 categories. Extra movement or drawing extra cards.
Right.
So you're making that decision at the end of every round around the table. Everyone gets to do an upgrade.
Right.
It's not about finding a location or doing anything special to do that. Everyone gets an upgrade. You get up to a max of 7. So if you've put 3 extra cards in your upgrades, you're still not going to be moving a lot.
Yeah.
So, and you're going to see other players doing that, and you're probably going to want to mix it up, but you're going to be able to take a lot of cards at the end of the round. Now, you're still limited to that that hand size.
Right.
But if you're one of those players that likes a lot of ways of breaking rules and mixing it up with cards, that's one route to take.
Yeah.
But when you're moving around the board, if you have 3 extra moves and you tumble, then do a slide where you're sliding 3 instead of 1, that can be pretty significant.
And the cards range from, I think there's 4 different types. You have items, which will slot on the left-hand portion of your board. You have pets, which slot on the right-hand portion of your board. And then you have runes, which give you
Runes,
special
Those are
abilities.
immediate effects, and then the food.
The food,
And
yeah.
the food is generally the ones that, in most cases, that falls into the category of what you play before movement, because
Yeah.
it oftentimes affects do extra +2 to a dash, or
Right.
extra 3 to a jump,
That's
or
right.
anything like that.
That's right.
So those are the 4 different kinds of cards. One thing to point out about the pets and the items, you can only have 1 pet
That's right.
and 1 item equipped at a time. Now, if you take another pet, you can replace this one.
Right.
There are also some items that allow you to break those rules. You
Yeah,
can
and
have
some of
2
the
pets
upgrades,
or 2
depending
items.
upon the each of these different characters has a different set of upgrades too. So some of them will allow
Right.
you to slot in a secondary pet.
So let's talk a little bit more about the tumble and action move.
Absolutely.
So we're going to go through. The first thing to note is on the player board, the actual actions and skills are tiles.
Yeah.
So at the beginning of the game, you can place those and organize them however you see fit. So Jeremy might have it so when his face is facing up, he jumps. Whereas if my feet are facing up, I might be
And
jumping.
the other cool portion about that too, there are abilities and cards in the game that allow you to reorganize those. So if
Exactly.
you're in a position where you could possibly win or possibly even do a better movement than you currently can, there's an ability to move those around so you can utilize those abilities, those jump abilities or those slide or tumble abilities, by getting them into the right kind of slot.
Right, it's really satisfying if you, like you said, you're making that turn and you're like, oh, I'm going to be on my left side, but my left side is dash and I need it to jump.
Right.
If you have a card, or everyone, in fact, when they use their Q power is what they call it, which is everyone's head. If the
right.
head is facing up, you get your Q power,
Yeah.
which includes reorganizing, but then it also includes a special unique power for each individual character.
That's right.
So anyway, as I was saying, you're going to tumble first and then activate one of these actions depending on what's
face up.
facing up.
Yeah.
You've got diagonal slide, which moves diagonally, obviously. Now, all of these except for the dash are going to move in one direction,
Yep.
and one direction only. Then you can have the dash, and the dash is going to be something that's really fun and very powerful. If you have a lot of movement and you activate the dash, you're avoiding traps, avoiding
Yeah.
pits, moving around walls.
Right.
The slide is like the diagonal slide, except it's orthogonal.
Right.
Then the tumble, and the tumble is one of, I'll come back to the tumble.
Okay.
Another one is the jump.
Yeah.
The jump allows you to jump over things. You can jump over other characters. You can
Walls.
jump over pits. You can jump over walls.
Right.
It comes in handy.
Right.
So finally, I want to talk about the tumble, which is actually probably one of the more interesting of the skills.
Right.
When you activate the tumble, of course, you started it with a tumble. If you activate the tumble, you're able to tumble X number amount more spaces according to your movement. And then on top of that, you get to do an extra bonus skill depending on where you ended up facing up on that second
So
tumble.
one of the key portions of movement is trying to get that tumble to activate every turn, if possible,
you can.
because it gives you that extra movement throughout the game.
Exactly.
The other thing we forgot to mention, there are world events too, right?
Right. They're optional, but there are world events that really shake things up. A lot of them reproduce some of what's on some of the normal cards, but you'll see some of these boards can actually rotate 90 degrees.
That's right.
And we've played a couple games now, and there are times where I'm about to reach my goal, but it's on the next board. Jeremy might play a card that rotates things, so now I'm very far away from it, and he's
Yeah.
even closer.
Right.
So there's some really cool things like that. Along with the upgrades, it really the way these tiles lay out and the way you can manage your upgrades really make the character feel a little unique to each player.
Yeah. Now, as David said too, this is a scenario-based game, right? So it's going to ship with its own set of scenarios. But as in talking to the designer, he had also mentioned to you that players have the option of creating scenarios that they wish to do.
I mean, it had occurred to me too while we were playing it, and that we asked him, and it absolutely is. I think first and foremost a great little system from which you can come up with your own games.
Right,
I
right.
mean, like I said earlier, there's a lot of racing, there's a lot of pick up and deliver. You can combine those. You could really be creative with how you wanted to approach this thing, coming up with even putting the boards separating the boards to some degree and having to jump from board to board, things
That's
like
interesting.
that.
I didn't think about that.
You can come up with some really cool ideas. And one thing we haven't touched on at all, these components, even in prototype form, are beautiful.
Yeah, I mean the graphic design from what we have seen here, we've been privy to some of the actual final graphic files within the game. It's a gorgeous looking game. He is I believe, a graphic designer himself.
Yeah, he does a lot of that sort of work.
And the artwork in this game is spectacular.
Yeah, the
really,
artwork,
really well done.
And like you said, the graphic design, which is sort of the unsung hero of a lot of board games. A lot of the details of how you lay a card out, and how you put a board together, and the kind of artwork you use really go a long way, and he's really nailed that even in this prototype form.
Yeah. So guys, that is Quad Heroes by Wonderment Games. Go check it out. It is on Kickstarter right now. Make sure you guys subscribe to this video. Please like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter, and check out our own Kickstarter on manvsmeeple.com, and we'll check you guys out next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Season 1 of Man vs. Meeple is sponsored by TMG Games, publisher of great games like Yokohama, Guilds of London, and the soon-to-be-released Colosseum.